On this week's GTA 6 o'clock, how will Act 1 of GTA 6 play out? Somebody robs the shop while Lucia is working there. More evidence of other locations. You can see part of the game's map as well. And an in-game election. Finally, a politician with balls. It's all here on this week's GTA 6 o'clock. Hello and welcome to episode 76 of GTA 6 o'clock, the world's most in-depth and best connected GTA 6 show. We are back on the horse, riding towards the release of GTA 6, which is now less than a year away. Only 11 months, in fact. But before that, we have lots to discuss. So I am JJ, your host, and joining me in the studio this week, as he has done for almost every episode, is Dan Dawkins.
Good day.
So Dan, we were going to do things a little bit differently this week. Last week's episode prompted a lot of discussion and emails from the community about just how Jason and Lucia could meet, which has led me to create a full-on theory for you and the listeners to enjoy, dissect, disagree with, hopefully with some bits that you agree with, but let's see. We've also got a couple of new screenshots in this theory, which we'll be using to sort of back up the chronology of events. So we should also take a good look at them as we are doing that. Some caveats before we jump in. I would say this is not a fully formed theory. It probably needs a lot more attention to get it to a place where there are no holes in it. So there are going to be some bits that you can definitely go, oh, well, I don't think that, and this could happen, and etc. I am fully aware of that. It's sort of a combined outline using my thoughts, some of your comments from last week, and emails we got from people like Neptune and Sam L. Thank you both very much for getting in touch at gtavio'clock@gmail.com. Dan, you haven't really heard this theory, so I'm going to invite you to do the job of the audience and jump in wherever and call me an idiot where you think things may or may not work. All right, so let's jump in. We are going to start very much where we left the discussion last week, and how I think the game is going to open with you playing as Jason. The sequence that we see at the start of trailer 2 is essentially our introduction to Jason and our introduction to the game. So we know that Jason grew up around grifters and crooks. That's detailed on the website. He's found himself in the Keys doing what he knows best, working for local drug runners. That drug runner, I think at least at the start of the game, is Brian Hedder. We see him in trailer 2 coming up to speak to Jason. Brian is letting Jason live rent-free in one of his properties, so long as he helps with local shakedowns and stops by Laurie, his third wife's, stops by her house for sangria once in a while. So far, so very much the beginning of trailer 2. There was an interesting quote from Brian Hedder that says, "Nothing better than a mudslide at sunset." How do you interpret the word mudslide then, Dan? Do you think a literal mudslide down a mountain or something else? Don't look further down these notes, it will ruin it.
I've already seen the notes.
Okay.
I'm going to have to fake a reaction. I don't know. Please let me know. I don't think it is a literal mudslide. Let's put it that way.
No, because we see Brian having a good time in a bar in lots of the scenes in the screenshots and the trailer. So a mudslide, for those of you who don't know, including Dan, is a combination. It's a cocktail, basically. It's a combination of vodka, coffee liqueur, Irish cream, and heavy cream, and is the quintessential boozy milkshake. The mudslide was born in the 1970s at Rec Bar in Rum Point Club on the Grand Cayman Islands. This leads me to an interesting question. The Grand Cayman Islands is an island south of Cuba in real life. Is this another hint from Rockstar saying, hey, there's lots of inspirations going on here, and one of them is the islands of Cuba, the Bahamas, etc. Maybe you'll be going there in GTA 6. Or is it just another reference to go, we're bringing in a lot of multicultural things into GTA 6 and Brian just likes a boozy cocktail?
Yeah, my unhelpful answer is I'm obviously not sure, but I do think there's been sort of repeated hints and or references to Cuba,
Mm.
which we could probably amass in a more compelling way. Yeah, on its own, like, no, it's not compelling enough on its own, but as part of a suite of things, it feels like Cuba or whatever it's called is part of this universe. So will we go there? I don't know. Like, it's pretty close. It's a good place to go. But on its own, I couldn't say this is a definitive clue.
No, but I was just thinking to call that out, because that is one of the quotes on the website. It's quite a significant thing to like name drop mudslide as a drink. Why not just say cocktail? And that it has its origins in Rum Point, Grand Cayman Islands. All these things, like you say, if you put all of these strings together, you might get a tiny ball of rope. But anyway, moving on from that, Brian, as we know, classic drug runner from the golden age of smuggling in the Keys. He's still moving product through his boatyard with Laurie. Brian's been around long enough to let others do his dirty work. One of those people is Jason, obviously doing his dirty work. The local shakedowns that are mentioned, I think, are pretty much what we see in the trailer, with Jason going into the shop with his baseball bat, shaking down the local shop runners, I guess. And I think then that these small missions are essentially Jason's tutorial that we'll get at the beginning of the game. We see them in the trailer and we see them in the screenshots. That is Jason being tasked with go and collect my money from all of these places. Some of them I think will just be like, rent money from people living in houses. Other will be rent money from shop fronts. Others may or may not be protection money. So we'll get to do your classic driving tutorial, your hand-to-hand combat, giving some people some beatdowns, weapon combat. We've already seen Jason holding a bat, running about, working out, doing his day-to-day life, which we saw him on the beach, and then, following waypoint markers, the usual stuff. Those missions from Brian, I think, are essentially going to form Jason's tutorial and our tutorial to the game, picking up on these new things. There is, in fact, I think, almost a full mission laid out in the screenshots that we've got and the trailer. And as a stretch, I'm going to say it might be during these missions that we start to hear about Lucia, but we don't see her, with people saying things like, when's she getting out? Or how long is it left until you see her again? Etc., etc. So the beginning bit of the trailer, where we see Jason working on the house and Brian comes out to say, go get me my checks. The important thing to note here is Brian's shirt, which is the one with the palm trees on. Because if you look at one of the character screenshots of him, he is wearing the same shirt. And this is important because I don't think it's a stretch then to say that this is from the same mission in the game, knowing what we know about most of the things that we've seen in trailer 1 and 2 are, I think, I don't know if you agree, Dan, but pretty much from the same section of the game, or at least, some key missions within the game.
Yeah, I agree. There's obviously going to be scenes you could say, but what about this scene?
Yes.
Broadly, I think Rockstar are showing us a quite compacted set of history. So, yeah, the sequencing of that you could argue about, but I do feel pretty confident this isn't giving much of the game away.
So this shot with Brian talking to a guy in a vehicle is really interesting because there is a guy, that vehicle is a plane here. As you can see in the background, the plane's got blue wings and it's outside of Brian's boatyard, possibly on a landing strip that exists there. And we know that Brian's boatyard is still moving product through his boatyard with Laurie. That's what he's using this for, to use drugs. Now, what he's got in his hand looks like a big old pile of drugs that they're going to use this plane to distribute somewhere. If you then look at the artwork of Brian, you can see part of the game's map as well. And that map has a lake circled on it. Now, my interpretation of this is that Brian is using the boatyard as a front and the product isn't being moved via the boats. So originally, you'd look at this and go, they're just using the boats to drive it around and drop it off at other locations. I think what's actually happening is they're using the planes to drop off some of this product in and around the map. Enter your flying tutorial. where it will be drop the product at this marked location on the map. We can see the marked location on the map in the artwork. And we even see these planes being loaded up in trailer 2. So you can see them putting something that is inside a suitcase onto the planes. And then these planes are making this journey in both trailer 1 and trailer 2. There is 2 different instances of this plane, I will admit. There is one that looks like it's got yellow highlights on its wings and other ones that have blue. But I would assume that they're doing pretty much the same job for the purposes of this explanation of what may or may not be happening here. What it makes this even more interesting is the tiny clip we've got of Cal Hampton, which features, drumroll, a seaplane flying over his head and dropping a package into a lake or a river for Cal to then go and collect from the boat that he is sitting in. We know a bit about Cal, that he's Jason's friend, he's an associate of Brian's. He feels safest hanging at home, snooping on Coast Guard comms with a few beers and some private browser tabs open. Cal is at the low tide of America and is happy there. Casual paranoia loves company, but his friend Jason has bigger plans. All of which I think feeds into the screenshot of Jason and Cal fishing on a boat. This is probably showing us that, yes, fishing is in the game, but I get the feeling that it's also hiding the fact that these fishing trips are being used as cover for Cal, Brian, and Jason to go and pick up the drugs that the plane has previously dropped into a lake or an area, and then you get tasked of going out to retrieve it from said area. So you've got Cal listening for the Coast Guard, tipping off Brian where the best locations are, what's a good time to fly the plane from one island to another, how do we get over the mainland, drop the package off into this lake, then go on a fishing trip to not actually catch any fish, to go and retrieve the drugs. This, I think, can be tied into a real life explanation. In 1975, we had Pablo Escobar and the cartel, who established cocaine trafficking routes into the US through Miami. And they were smuggling 40 to 60 kilograms of cocaine to Miami every week via airdrops over the Everglades from small planes, earning around $8 million per month. So this sort of ties into, I would imagine, Brian's big plan of start off small, escalate into this kind of big drug trafficking ring and become a modern day Pablo Escobar, which I think later in the story will have some consequences. But I think there's something in it, right? Like, it does seem to tie together that the planes are the ones dropping off the drugs somehow. And Cal is involved, I think, as part of his, what looks like a fishing operation, but actually isn't. I think all of those things tie up. Which brings us to what I'm going to call the flashback. Now, this is definitely a bit that is going to need some of your imagination, Dan. So, broadly, I'm making the statement that Lucia and her mum are in Vice City based on the fact that the quote on the Rockstar website is, Lucia wants the good life for her and her mum have dreamed of since their days in Liberty City. Now, I'm taking the word their days in Liberty City to mean both of them together were previously in Liberty City, and now they have both moved to Vice City. You could also interpret that as their days they were in Vice City and Lucia has left her mum behind. I don't know which way you want to take that. It doesn't really implement this theory one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't know. I think what I would agree with is the idea of it was in the past that they were in Liberty City. I think that's agreed. The bit that feels a bit unknowable is whether, what's the status of her mum? Like, is her mum still in Liberty City? Has her mum come with her to Leonida? Is her mum even alive?
Mm-hmm.
All a bit unknowable to me. But like the idea of like, I think, at a point in Lucia's youth, her and her mum had a shared dream when they were in Liberty City. Yes, definitely. And then the rest is harder to pin down, I think. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, I agree. We also know that fighting for her family landed her in the Leonida penitentiary. Luck got her out. There's a lot of debate about what luck getting her out could mean and how that happens. There is quite a lot of evidence in real life to suggest that it could simply be like a prison overcrowding situation where she just did like a small misdemeanor, which I think is what we're agreed on, me and you at least, Dan, that it's a what you would class as, a petty crime in the grand scheme of crimes.
Oh,
So it's not
Yeah.
something that,
Yeah.
she's going to go into prison for years for, possibly, but it's something like prison overcrowding might get you out on, spend a little bit of time in jail, then we'll tag you. And as long as you're good for the next however long, fine, don't worry about it. And there is quite a lot of prison overcrowding in real life Florida where this thing does happen.
Yeah.
So it could be that it was just a time that she came there and they were like, oh, we're full. We can't take any more prisoners. Stay here for 48 hours and then you're out again.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also wonder, the thing is always, does luck truly exist? And in which case, is it that she believes it to be luck and it's positioned to her as luck that she's got out? But could it be it's been engineered and just told to her, it's your lucky day, it's, you got out for this reason, but it might not really be that. It might be something else. We don't know that. That would just be my potential reading of it.
So the scene that we have where they meet in the trailer is them reconnecting. And I like to think that we're agreed on this, Dan, that Jason and Lucia are not meeting for the first time here. They do have a past in some form, which I'll try and get onto in a second. But it's a relationship rekindling, as it were. Because we see in the trailer that Jason even picks up some beer on his way. I'm assuming he is on his way to see her when he picks up the beers. He's wearing the same T-shirt. Obviously, people can wear T-shirts, more than once a week if they want. But for the sake of the trailer and the screenshot sequences, I'm going to assume that it's in the same sequence of events. So here's where I think the flashback could happen. You go and meet Lucia, having done all of your Jason tutorial bits. You've done all your driving around. You've done your fighting. You've bashed up some people with a bat. And then it's time to go pick up Lucia. You get there. She leaves the prison as she does in the trailer. They hug. And then we get some kind of flashback that says 6 months earlier. So we're already, I'm going to say, hours into the game before we get this, which flips it around from the way that GTA 5 started, where we instantly got taken back to a time before the main game starts. So it mixes it up slightly, but it still uses that mechanic because I think it's quite powerful. And it does give you a chance to do a lot of the tutorializing that you maybe need to do. So that 6 month earlier scene, I think, is going to be Lucia's tutorial. This is where it gets even more washy. There is a possibility, let's put this in your mind, that Lucia has a family shop in the Keys, that maybe her and her mum moved there and started a little family business in the Keys. While doing one of these shakedowns for Brian, Jason goes into the shop and meets Lucia, and they strike up a friendship. Possibly while Jason is collecting the protection money from her to say, hey, you're in our strip now, you're going to need to give us $200 a month and we will make sure everything's cool with your shop. However, what happens is somebody robs the shop while Lucia is working there. She fights back, tries to escape the local cops because a big fight ensues. They arrive. She has to run away. She ends up in jail. That is a bit of a fight would probably end you up in jail, depending on, how much of the fight she got into. She could have really caused someone quite a lot of harm. Therefore, she's in jail for slightly longer. Jason then feels bad for not protecting Lucia because he was, that was the whole reason he kept turning up every week to say, don't worry about it, we got this. So then when he's going to pick her up, he is there sort of as a friend, definitely as an acquaintance, but, takes the beer as a peace offering and was like, hey, I've come to pick you up. Sorry about you having to defend your family shop when those thugs came. etc., etc. They then go to the Rusty Anchor, which we see in the trailer, and they toast to new beginnings, which is a line from the trailer. And I also like this because there's a line in the trailer just after that where Lucia says, "You broke my nose, that's what."
You broke my nose, that's what. You broke my nose, that's what.
Now, I think this is clearly her doing a voice impersonating somebody else rather than saying to Jason, "You broke my nose." That's why we're like, having a bit of banter. So I think that implies that maybe she heard someone say this to her during the fight in the store. And she's like, "Yeah, get out. Why are you crying?" And he's like, "You broke my nose," or whatever. So I think that could be a nice way to give Lucia a bit of your tutorial where you play out that sequence. You're in the shop, you drive to the shop maybe, someone comes in, you have to protect yourself, then you drive away from the cops, you get a star rating, you ultimately end up getting arrested.
Shall I dive in?
Yes, please.
I'm going to dive in and say I like large parts of this theory. And I think there's bits, there's connective tissue leaps I think you can stand up with reactions. The bit that I think is the biggest evidential challenge is what's the proof for Lucia owning a shop or being part of a shop in the area?
There isn't any, but Dan, I had to find a way to get her to have a fight with someone and end up in jail.
No, I like this. This is like I'm like I'm Poirot or something. This is exciting.
Well done. Yes.
But yeah, that aside, which is obviously quite a big circumstantial leap. It's a big leap. But what I like a lot is I agree when they meet Jason and Lucia, it's clear in her face she knows him. There's recognition, and there's also sort of happiness, but it's like a tentative happiness. And he's almost a bit like, a bit shruggy and unsure.
Mm.
There's something in there, whilst it's a positive thing, then they don't at that point look like they're embracing or acknowledging each other in the way that like, I don't know, fully connected lovers would do, but there's recognition. So I think there's something in that idea of there was an incident and they left on, if not bad, confused terms. And he's going back, like whether it's hoping it's going to be okay or to make her a proposal or whatever. It feels like that's, they're not fully engaged at that point.
Yeah, they're not running out and hugging each other.
No.
At least in the scene that we see. Which suggests, some kind of former relationship, but not one that really went any further than them just being good friends or knowing each other in some way. But, it's that kind of like, a work acquaintance that he's then gone to pick up from jail.
Yeah, and the bit that I guess throws a bit of this out is very shortly afterwards in the trailer, we've got scenes of them rolling around on a bed. So you feel, and whether that's chronologically the same thing, which I sort of feel like it's implied, feels like if they are a tentative point of acquaintance, it's accelerated really fast. But they're both young, attractive people, and it looks like they're drinking and going out. You could see how that could work together, right? Where they go from tentative meeting to let's roll around in the bed. That could happen on a drunken night. I can totally buy that. And I think there's something in you, right, to pick up that line of dialogue around, you broke my nose, and she is doing an impression of someone. I guess the question I have then is whether it's an impression of someone who they, said that to them when they were both there in the same scene, or I wondered if it was her gently mocking Jason for saying that, like in a playful way, where you go, you broke my nose. Like she's sort of like saying to him, like gently playing with him, like mocking him for saying something. So whether it was his nose that was broken or one of them broke someone else's nose in both of their presences. God, it's so complicated.
Yeah.
I don't know. But so like assumptive leap of why would she be in the store and does she own it aside? I like that because it would make sense that he'd know her a bit from visiting the shops, but not enough to be, super, super friends. But but we haven't got evidence to stand that up. But I do think that assumptive leap aside, there's a lot to like here.
Well, hopefully there is. We will see in the
I know,
comments.
Savaged in the comments. But I think and what I like overall with, and I know we're not finished, but like what I like overall is they undoubtedly have to create an intro that acts as a tutorial. And to go back to GTA 4, they did that with Nico gets off the boat and he's in a car straight away, and it's do this to drive, press this, do that. In GTA 5, it was straight into basically combat, really, where you began and you were in the heist, and you were like, it started gently, where you were sort of stood, you know, looking over the shoulder. Before you know it, it's like, press this to aim your gun, do this, do this, do this. So I think that particularly the Jason side of this, those baby steps feel really good. You can imagine the point where he leaves his house and it's like, press this to walk, press this to enter the car. And that just makes so much gameplay sense. And then, I don't, it really, and let's be clear, right? This could go a lot of different ways. We all know that, but it's a lot to like. And as I think I talked about last week, there was this gameplay leak a while ago that talked about the game opening with a drug bust gone wrong, but it sounded a bit grander in the leak. It sounded more like the thing we see where there's a big plane and that sort of thing. But plans change. We know the plans changed. We know it's gone from Project Americas to what this is. So it could be they've just tweaked and revised what the original plans were. So yeah, sorry to derail the flow, but of course people are going to pick holes in the theory. But I think there's a lot of things to like in here.
And to your point, it does make this, GTA 6 start a lot slower than GTA 5. Like you mentioned, that starts with a big raid on a bank vault, but this would be back to the whole GTA 4 style. Okay, get in the car, explore the world a little bit, take in the sights and sounds and learn that way, which is a similar kind of situation to how Red Dead 2 starts, when it's just like, ride your horse for 2 hours and speak to these people and learn what's going on that way. So we could have seen a shift from GTA 5 to Red Dead, which then has an impact on how GTA 6 starts. Like, I wouldn't mind a bit of a slower opening and a bit more of a, just let me drive around a little bit and see what's going on. But that's personal preference. So all of that does bring us to the new beginnings, being Jason and Lucia together, Jason bringing Lucia, I'm going to say, into the Brian, Jason, Cal operation side of things, of like, come to the boatyard, we can get you some work doing, going on this fake fishing trip or whatever that is, which I think starts the beginning of Act 2 of the game, essentially. Where if we're saying Act 1 is the first half is Jason, the second half is Lucia, that wraps up Act 1, and then Act 2 becomes you can then play as both characters and choose what you want to do when, which leads on to, I would imagine, them doing small time operations like the job that we see at the end of trailer 1 when they go into the convenience store together and rob that, and then slightly bigger things, which is the whole sequence where we have Lucia in the gold dress on what looks to be a super yacht. Then they go to the 919 club in Vice City. Like, that feels like it's the end of, it's like a celebration of something that's gone well. We've done a thing, and now we're living the high life with the rewards that we got from doing whatever that was. What that mission is, I don't think we've seen yet, because the only other big mission that we've seen is the one where they're robbing a bank.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going
wrong.
Looks like it's going not that well.
Yeah.
It's escalated, certainly. So it doesn't feel like that ends in them going to the nightclub together.
No. I mean, it would be quite the adventure in the nightclub if they did. Suddenly, we're not going to lie low. We're going to go straight out, get your party dress on.
None of that makes sense. And like, that's the same scene where we were saying that the trailer 1 of her in the back of the car with her arms up. It doesn't feel like the thing you'd be doing. Whoa, about that massive shootout in the streets today. No, doesn't make sense.
So that, I think, is where, for this theory, I'd want to leave that intro to the game at the beginning of Act 2. There's lots more we could say about what happens in Act 2 and beyond, probably in future episodes as we dive in. So hopefully that has sparked some things in some of your imaginations. Dan, I hope you picked enough holes in it for people to agree in the comments that some of that could work. Obviously, it's just a theory, and there are loads of theories flying around, loads of different things. Some of them feel more real than others. I've just tried to sort of combine everything into a way that I think some of these things could happen in the game. Maybe not in that sequence, but we're not going to know for about 11 months.
Yeah, and it's entirely possible the game begins with something we're just not seeing. Like we a long time ago on GTA 6 o'clock, we when we had less information, we were having fun throwing around ideas such as, could the intro pick up at the end of GTA Vice City? And it's Tommy Vercetti and it's the 80s. And there's all sorts of things it could do. I think, GTA 5's North Yankton wasn't pictured in any trailers. Having said that, I think I literally predicted it. Not North Yankton, but a heist gone wrong as the intro. But maybe there were other clues. I can't remember even why what led me to that. But there was other things. But I didn't say it's definitively North Yankton, and that wouldn't be true. So it could be going anywhere. But from the evidence we have, I like a lot of these pieces. I say the only leap that's a bit assumptive is she's working in the store. We can't stand that up.
Yeah.
But it's a nice bit of sticking plaster to get us to the other bits that feel more tangible. So, please debate intelligently amongst yourselves in the comments. Let us know where this does or doesn't stand up, or propose, if you can stand it up, an alternative theory.
Yes, and I would hope that over the next 11 months, we come up with enough theories that at least one of them is going to be true.
Yes.
Now, quickly before we go down, I did want to touch on one of the screenshots that we haven't properly analysed yet, and it's this one from the Ambrosia section of the website. Bit of facts for Ambrosia. Its tagline, for want of a better word, is "Keeping Leonida Sweet. The battle for health and wealth of Leonida begins here. In the heart of Leonida, American industry and old-school values still reign supreme, whatever the cost. The Allied Crystal Sugar Refinery provides the jobs, while the local biker gang provides almost everything else." I think, and this is going to be some fun pronunciations, that the assumption is that this is based in real life on the surrounding Lake Okeechobee? Question mark. Yes, Dan hasn't corrected that. Are we saying Okeechobee?
I'll only mispronounce it, but yes, that is the river that everyone seems to believe is this area.
And particularly Clewiston. So map fans, that puts Ambrosia right next to the lake in the middle of the map that we have seen in the GTA mapping project. It's sort of just to the south of the big map in the center of Florida in real life. So extrapolate that into GTA 6. You can pretty much pinpoint where this area might be. Now, the screenshot we're talking about is the one that you can see on screen. Gives you a good look at that motorbike gang called Final Chapter. One of these gang members in a later screenshot is wearing a Liberty City Cycles cap. Now, Liberty City Cycles has appeared in Lost and the Damned, Ballad of Gay Tony, GTA 5 and GTA Online. So it's a recognized brand. It's obviously going to appear in GTA 6 as well. But most importantly, on the far left-hand side of this image, you can see signs for Vote Erin Henshaw. They also say the sweet lifeblood of Ambrosia. And another one says, finally, it's cut off, but I'm pretty sure it says, finally a politician with balls. And then further in the background, you've got Henshaw for mayor. So this opens up the question of, are we going to get a mayor election run during the course of GTA 6? And what scope does that give the story, if any? Like, this could just be background to make the world feel more alive, and we've had these kind of things in GTA games before, where political parties or campaigns have been mentioned but don't actually ever come to anything. But if you take our theory that there's going to be some timeline evolution in GTA 6, and in this screenshot we've got placards to say there's a mayor election coming, is the timeline going to advance far enough to see what that result is? Or do you think that it's more just world building, Dan?
I think, well, all of those things could be true, but I think what's obvious is from the way Ambrosia is described on the website, where it says, like, the battle for the health and wealth of Leonida begins here. In the heart of Leonida, American industry and old school values still reign supreme. This Ambrosia seems like the proxy heartland for the real life political and cultural skirmish that's currently almost like a binary polarity within America. And the Erin Henshaw character, I think, from looking at the signs that this person is associated with, is clearly the one who supports, I guess, what would be the equivalent of fracking, oil, what is their local, probably highly polluting sugar industry, which is the sweet lifeblood of Ambrosia. And that placard's actually got the Allied Crystal logo on it. So I guess it would be no surprise to go either it's sponsored by or it's deliberately promoting that thing. Now, taking this as a couple of steps further on, I don't know to what extent Rockstar are actually going to get involved with this. There's a picture of the biker gang driving down a street in formation, and like above them is a logo for, like, I think a fast food chain, which is promoting its diversity efforts, and it's got clear echoes of like a Pride style logo. So you've got, on one hand, old school values from what seems like the people who are in the area. On the other, corporate progressive values, much as you've got in real America. Now, I wonder if there's something about kind of gender debate war stuff in Erin Henshaw, who you would assume is a woman, right? Assume. But then it says finally a male or politician with balls. So there's a playfulness, again, about gender in there. I don't know what any of it means, if anything, or like if you actually get to vote on this or it's something in the background. But I would say it's probably going to be the way that Rockstar tackle, say something, let people decide something culture wars. And that seems pretty obvious, you know, and I think there's this extra layer of, it's just how on the nose they get or how preachy they get. That's going to be a big talking point come the game releasing.
Yeah, and it could all, you know, come back to the political allegiances of certain areas of the map and how those people interact with each other. You know, you've mentioned quite a lot of times about all of the thematic around GTA 6 being about trust. Obviously, trust in politicians is quite debated about how that could go. Does all of this tie in together somehow to form a bigger part of the story? Well, lots to discuss there then, not just in our theory, but for this one screenshot. We will be taking a look at much more of these screenshots over the coming weeks. But for now, I'm going to say thank you for all the emails that we've got. Thank you for the comments. If you want to email us, you can email us at gtavoclock@gmail.com. You can get in touch on Twitter at gtavoclock, or you can sign up for the newsletter, which may or may not condense all of this into a nice couple of paragraphs for you. That website address, Dan, is
gamesradar.com/newsletter, and click to sign on the GTA 6 o'clock newsletter. Last week, you would have missed a really good deep dive into the mapping project and a lot of the great work that you might even be contributing to as part of the community. Please do subscribe. It's weekly. It's free every Thursday at 6 p.m. BST. So it's a nice little coda to the podcast.
Once again, thank you all for listening. I will actually be away next week. I am going to the real life equivalent of Los Santos, Los Angeles, for the Summer Game Fest events. So the might be an episode. If there is, it will be just Dan. Maybe it'll be with Dan and the special guest. We'll work something out and we will let you know on socials what is happening. But thank you all for listening and join us again for another episode of GTA 6 o'clock.